The story begins at an American high school, where Eddie, a quiet nerd who usually keeps to himself, is on his way to detention. When he arrives, he immediately spots Janet, the cheerleader he's had a crush on for a long time. She's standing with her boyfriend, Brad, along with Brad's best friend, Jimmy. Hoping to make a good impression, Eddie walks over to say hello, but Brad, who loves picking on him, tells him to get lost and snaps his glasses in half. With no choice, Eddie heads to the back of the classroom. He pulls a small toolkit out of his backpack and calmly repairs his glasses. A few moments later, Ash arrives. He's a skateboarder who's known for selling illegal substances. Soon after, Willow shows up. She's Eddie's best friend, a goth girl who's completely obsessed with zombie movies. Another student named Mark is also sent to detention, but it's obvious something is wrong with him. Ash walks over to see if Mark is okay, partly because he's curious and partly because he's hoping to sell him something. At the same time, the detention teacher, Mrs. Rumblethorpe, arrives to supervise the students. Eddie quickly asks her if this detention will go on his school record, because he's worried it could ruin his chances of getting into Harvard. Before she can answer, Ash notices that Mark has a nasty wound. Mark explains that a homeless man bit him on the street. When everyone looks at the bite, they see his hand is badly swollen and his skin is starting to rot. Seconds later, Mark suddenly collapses and begins having a violent seizure. His skin turns pale and a strange slime starts dripping from his mouth. Mrs. Rumblethorpe rushes over to help him, but without warning, Mark attacks her and bites her on the neck. The students jump in to pull him away, and after struggling to get him off the teacher, they slam him into a sink. The impact snaps his neck, knocking him unconscious, while Mrs. Rumblethorpe is left bleeding badly. Trying to stop the bleeding, Willow tears off part of Janet's cheerleading uniform despite Janet protesting. Meanwhile, Brad runs into the hallway to find help, only to discover that students all over the school have become infected and are tearing each other apart. It doesn't take long for Eddie and Willow to realize that everything they've seen in zombie movies is actually happening. Eddie suggests they stay in the classroom and hide, but before anyone can settle in, Mark suddenly stands back up. He twists his broken neck back into place and staggers toward them, forcing everyone to run. Even though they know Mrs. Rumblethorpe will probably turn into a zombie too, Eddie and Willow refuse to leave her behind. Together, the group carries her through the school halls. After sneaking past several hungry zombies, they make it to the main office and try calling for help, but none of the phones can get a signal. With no other option, they lock the doors to keep the zombies out. Eddie decides to check the principal's office to see if anyone is still alive, but when he walks inside, all he finds are the principal's remains hanging from the ceiling fan. Realizing no rescue is coming, Brad tells everyone they need to find a safer place to hide. Eddie suggests the library, since hardly anyone ever goes there except him, and the bookshelves could make great barricades. Everyone agrees. One by one, they leave the office, but just before reaching the library, they find two zombies feeding on a dead student. Eddie explains that zombies only seem to notice what's directly in front of them, so if they stay quiet and don't draw attention to themselves, they should be able to sneak by. Brad decides to test Eddie's theory by making him go first. Terrified, but with no real choice, Eddie slowly walks past the two zombies. Luckily, they're too busy eating to notice him. Just when it looks like the plan has worked, Ash gets excited and loudly congratulates Eddie. The noise immediately catches the attention of every zombie nearby, and they begin closing in on the group from every direction. Thinking fast, Eddie starts banging on a row of lockers, pulling all the zombies toward himself. His plan works perfectly, giving everyone else enough time to rush safely into the library. Now Eddie is the only one left outside. Feeling more confident than before, he dives underneath the two zombies near the entrance and slips past them without getting caught. Willow can't help being impressed by how brave her friend has become. Once everyone is inside, they pile bookshelves and furniture against the doors to create a barricade. With the entrance secured, they turn their attention back to Mrs. Rumblethorpe, whose condition is getting worse by the minute. Willow tells Janet to keep pressure on the wound while she and Eddie try to figure out what to do. Unfortunately, the teacher dies from her injuries. Janet desperately tries to perform CPR, but there's no response. Then the same strange slime that covered Mark's mouth begins oozing from Mrs. Rumblethorpe's lips. Not realizing what's happening, Janet leans in to give her mouth to mouth. But the teacher has already turned into a zombie and is just about to bite her. At the very last second, Eddie notices the danger and shoves Janet out of the way, saving her life. Eddie hopes Janet will finally notice what he did, but instead she believes Brad was the one who rescued her and thanks him with a kiss. Disappointed, Eddie keeps his feelings to himself. The group then pins the zombie teacher down on a table while trying to figure out how to stop her. During the struggle, Brad says he hurt his hand. Eddie immediately asks if he's been bitten, but Brad insists he only dislocated a finger. Willow explains that the only way to kill a zombie is by destroying its brain. Ash spots a large paper cutter and suggests using it. Everyone forces Mrs. Rumblethorpe toward the blade while Ash repeatedly slams it down onto her neck until her head is cut off. Her body finally stops moving, but because her brain is still intact, the severed head remains alive. Hours pass as the group stays trapped inside the library while countless zombies wait outside. Things get even worse when Brad secretly checks his injured finger. He discovers that Mrs. Rumblethorpe really did bite him, and the infection has already started spreading. Knowing he'll eventually turn, he hides the wound and keeps it to himself. Trying to decide their next move, Brad asks the others for ideas. Eddie and Willow insist they should stay hidden because, according to every zombie movie they've ever seen, leaving a safe place is almost always a terrible idea. Brad disagrees. He thinks they should search the library for anything that might help them survive, so everyone splits up. While looking through the shelves, Jimmy gets distracted by a book. Suddenly, a zombie librarian sneaks up behind him and bites him in the throat. The others hear him scream and rush over, pulling the zombie away. They scramble for anything they can use as a weapon, but the library is full of nothing except books, so they start throwing them at the zombie to slow it down. At the same time, Brad tries to help Jimmy, but the bite is too severe. Jimmy quickly loses consciousness. Furious, Brad grabs a flagpole from one of the displays, snaps it in half, and uses the sharp end to smash the zombie librarian in the head, finally destroying her brain. With the zombie dead, the group now has to face another terrible reality. Jimmy will soon come back as one of them. Knowing there's no hope, Jimmy decides to end things on his own terms. He throws himself out of the library window, drawing the attention of every zombie outside, who immediately swarm his body and begin devouring him. After witnessing the horrifying scene, the survivors do everything they can to stay quiet and hidden inside the library. Later, Brad secretly checks his arm again and sees that the infection has spread even farther, but he keeps it hidden beneath his jacket so no one notices. Meanwhile, Janet is overwhelmed by fear and begins to panic. Wanting everyone to calm down, Ash decides to hand out his stash for free, making an exception because of the situation. Everyone accepts except Eddie, who points out that in horror movies, the people who use drugs are usually the first ones to die. Still, after seeing everyone else trying to relax for a few minutes, Eddie finally gives in. Even though he clearly doesn't enjoy it, the others get a good laugh watching the shy nerd step outside his comfort zone for once. Taking advantage of the calmer mood, Ash asks Eddie, Brad, and Janet why they ended up in detention. Brad and Janet admit they were caught together in a very embarrassing situation in the school bathroom, making everyone burst into laughter. Janet then admits she's tired of people constantly judging her just because she's one of the popular kids. Feeling sorry for her, Eddie decides to open up too. He reveals that he was caught with an illegal drug in his backpack. Eddie admits he only brought the drugs because he thought they would help him study hard enough to earn a spot at Harvard. But after Mrs. Rumblethorpe caught him, he ended up in detention, destroying his chances of getting into the university. Feeling completely hopeless, he also reveals that he has a gun hidden inside his backpack. In the end, Eddie says all he wants now is to survive the zombie apocalypse, and the only way they'll make it out alive is if they stop judging each other and start working together. Before anyone can respond, Willow hears strange banging coming from the other side of the library wall. She calls everyone over, and the 5 survivors listen as loud thumps echo through the wall, as if something is trying to break inside. Suddenly, a zombie's arm bursts straight through the wall. Janet screams as the creature grabs her, but Eddie doesn't hesitate. He grabs a heavy book and slams it against the zombie's arm until it lets go. This time, Janet sees with her own eyes that Eddie is the one who saved her, and she thanks him with a hug. Eddie is thrilled, but the moment doesn't last long. The zombie's hand reaches through the hole again and grabs him in a very painful spot. The creature yanks Eddie against the wall while everyone rushes over to help, but no matter how hard they pull, the zombie refuses to let go. Finally, Janet and Willow shove a heavy book card into the wall, tearing the zombie's arm completely off. Unfortunately, the severed hand is still clamped onto Eddie. Ash joins him, and after a painful struggle, the two finally pry the hand loose. After that bizarre encounter, the group settles back down to wait. Looking through a crack in the door, Eddie notices the hallway is filling up with more and more zombies. He realizes that if they all charge the entrance at once, the barricade won't last more than a few seconds. Trying to take his mind off the situation, Eddie starts staring at Janet. Willow, who's always had feelings for him, quietly asks what he actually sees in her. As they talk, she points out that Eddie isn't really in love with Janet. He's only attracted to her because she's beautiful and popular. She also tells him that he's spent so much time trying to impress other people that he's forgotten to value himself. Her words hit Eddie hard. For the first time, he sees Willow in a completely different light. He promises that if they survive the apocalypse, he'll take her on a date, and Willow happily accepts. Their quiet moment is interrupted when Ash announces that he really needs to use the bathroom. Eddie argues that leaving the library now is way too dangerous, but Willow notices the zombies outside are only getting closer. Looking around, she discovers a ventilation duct large enough for everyone to crawl through. The others agree it's probably their best chance to escape. The only exception is Janet, who refuses to leave the library and risk running into the zombies. She asks Brad to stay with her, but since his infection is getting worse, he wants to leave in hopes of finding some kind of cure instead. Willow climbs into the air duct and tells everyone to follow her. To her surprise, Eddie refuses. His decision hurts Willow, but she keeps moving forward with Ash and Brad. That leaves only Eddie and Janet alone inside the library. With nothing else to do, the two sit down together and try to relax. Eddie finally asks why someone like Janet would never date a guy like him. Janet honestly tells him that popular cheerleaders only date athletes and would never be seen with someone like Eddie. Her answer stings, and Eddie finally realizes she has nothing in common with him, exactly like Willow had been trying to tell him all along. Meanwhile, Willow, Ash, and Brad continue crawling through the dark ventilation shaft, using a lighter to see where they're going. Then Willow hears something moving inside the ducts. She looks closer and is horrified to discover a giant zombie rat. She immediately tells the others to back up, but before they can react, the ventilation shaft collapses under their combined weight, sending all three crashing into the hallway below. Luckily, there aren't any zombies nearby. As everyone gets back on their feet, Ash realizes he left his stash behind inside the duct. He asks Brad to help him reach it. Ash manages to grab his bag, but right beside it is the giant zombie rat. The creature tears Ash apart, leaving only his legs to fall out of the ventilation shaft. Unfortunately, the noise attracts every nearby zombie, and within seconds, Willow and Brad are surrounded. With no better option, they grab Ash's severed legs and use them as makeshift clubs, smashing aside any zombie that gets in their way. Back inside the library, Eddie's blunt comments about Janet's personality make her start seeing him differently. Realizing they might not have much time left, she decides to share a romantic moment with him before the end. Just as they're about to kiss, Willow and Brad rush back to the library, desperately pounding on the door. Without thinking twice, Eddie and Janet tear down the barricade just enough to let them inside. They make it safely back in, but now every zombie knows exactly where they're hiding. The creatures pile against the entrance, and the barricade begins to buckle. As Eddie desperately tries to think of a plan, Janet is still focused on having her romantic moment. She pulls Eddie into the next room, even though he clearly doesn't want to go. Meanwhile, Willow stays behind with Brad. By now, the infection has spread through his arm and into his nervous system. Brad begins turning into a zombie and starts ripping apart the barricade from the inside. Willow runs into the next room to warn Eddie. She finds him with Janet and, despite clearly hating the situation, quickly tells them Brad has turned and they have to seal the doorway before it's too late. The three rush back and find Brad fully transformed. While Eddie and Willow work to block the door, Janet stays behind to face her former boyfriend. She's devastated to see what he's become and hesitates to fight him. To snap her out of it, Eddie and Willow start making up stories claiming Brad had been cheating on her with other cheerleaders. That finally gives Janet the push she needs. She grabs a chair and smashes it into Brad, but when that doesn't stop him, she picks up a wooden stake, drives it into his chest, and shoves him out the window. Afterwards, she runs back to help Eddie and Willow finish blocking the entrance. Even then, everyone knows the barricade won't last much longer. Looking around for anything useful, Eddie spots Ash's skateboard, several broken chairs, and Mrs. Rumblethorpe's still living head. Using all of it, he quickly throws together a makeshift vehicle. The three climb aboard and burst straight through the door, crashing into the horde of zombies. Eddie fires his pistol to clear a path while Willow grabs the library's flagpole and crushes zombies by striking them in the head. For a moment, it looks like the escape plan is actually working. But when they reach the stairs, their homemade vehicle flips over, throwing all three of them onto the steps. At that exact moment, the zombie versions of Ash, Jimmy, and Brad appear and attack. Willow takes down Ash, then pulls a razor from her boot and drives it into Jimmy's head, saving Eddie. She then rushes over to Janet, who's struggling against zombie Brad. Willow yanks the wooden stake out of Brad's chest and smashes him in the head, finally knocking him to the ground. The three friends manage to escape, but dozens of zombies are still roaming the school, and Eddie's gun is almost out of bullets. Their only remaining option is to make a run for the gymnasium, where they can climb a ladder leading to the roof. They sprint through the swarm and reach the gym doors. Unfortunately, the doors are locked. While Willow desperately works to unlock them, Eddie realizes there isn't enough time. Knowing someone has to hold the zombies back, he decides to stay behind so Willow and Janet have a chance to escape. Summoning all his courage, Eddie hands his pistol to Willow and tells her everything that's happened has made him realize who he truly wants to be with. Hearing that makes Willow smile. She tells Eddie to come back alive because he still owes her that date. Eddie promises he will. Armed with nothing but a baseball bat, he charges straight into the horde, smashing every zombie that gets in his way. Eventually, the bat breaks apart. Looking around, Eddie spots several pencils scattered across the stairs. Without hesitating, he grabs them and starts driving them into the zombies' heads one after another. Eventually, Eddie runs into a zombie carrying a clarinet. He quickly takes it away and uses the instrument to smash the zombie in the head. After leaving a trail of defeated zombies behind him, Eddie suddenly hears a scream coming from the gym and rushes over to help. Unfortunately, while Willow and Janet were climbing the ladder to the roof, a zombie cheerleader managed to bite Janet on the foot. Willow immediately shoots the zombie with Eddie's pistol, allowing both girls to finish climbing onto the roof. Even though they've made it to safety, they both know Janet isn't going to survive. To make matters worse, there's only one bullet left. Accepting her fate, Janet asks Willow to shoot her before she turns. Willow reluctantly points the gun at her, but just before she pulls the trigger, Eddie climbs onto the roof and reunites with them. At that moment, a zombie that followed Eddie up the ladder charges toward the group. With no other choice, Willow fires the last bullet and kills it with a headshot. Seconds later, Zombie Brad appears and rushes straight at them. Now out of bullets and with no weapons left, Eddie and Willow have no way to defend themselves. Seeing this, Janet uses the last of her strength to tackle Brad, sending both of them off the roof. Her sacrifice saves Eddie and Willow, but dozens of zombies are still making their way toward the rooftop. Just when all hope seems lost, several military vehicles arrive at the school. The U.S. Army unleashes heavy firepower, wipes out the zombie horde, and finally brings the outbreak under control. Relieved that it's finally over, Eddie and Willow climb down from the roof as the only survivors left in the school. Ready to move on with their lives, they decide it's finally time to go on the date they promised each other. Realizing Willow has been the one he truly cared about all along, Eddie kisses her in front of everyone. It seems like they finally get their happy ending. But right after the kiss, zombie Janet suddenly appears beside them and knocks Eddie to the ground. Willow stands frozen as gunshots ring out, leaving it unknown whether Eddie was infected.